I know we're starting a little early today, but it's one of those parking lot days where we try to get it in when we get it in, as we say. Happy International Women's Day, and I mean it. But with everything that's going on in the world, it's difficult to say happy anything, and especially with the degree of suffering of women around the world. It seems a bit ludicrous to say, well, happy Women's Day, but in honor of that, I'm going to share with you the prologue to the book Homemade Magick, new edition. I keep promising coming out hopefully sometime this year, because it's my ode. It's my ode to woman. And it's called Nebraska Maids. And it opens with an epigram from Willa Cather, the great Nebraska author. And this is, I believe, from The Gold Slipper, her story. It does not matter much whom we live with in this world, but it matters a great deal whom we dream of. Like my father and my brother before me, I was born in Southern California and journeyed to rural Nebraska to find a bride. All three of us did that. There's something primeval and mammalian about being born and raised in one part of the world, then traveling to some strange and exotic land to fall in love and to find a mate. Indeed, many classic fairy tales tell of a wandering prince who wins his dream princess in a foreign land. Obviously, I'm not a prince, and Nebraska isn't exactly a strange and exotic land. Might be pretty strange. But for a 7-year-old boy rudely uprooted from his home in sunny Southern California, the Cornhusker State in 1956 was a grotesque nightmare. I felt like a shell-shocked war refugee, cruelly banished from my beachfront homeland and exiled to a dusty, chigger-infested wilderness populated by coarse barbarians who didn't trim the fat off their ham sandwiches, who considered Jell-O with a dollop of mayonnaise to be salad, and for some strange reason called lunch dinner. I languished for a full decade in small-town Nebraska, fantasizing that I'd be rescued by a flying saucer and plotting my escape back to the hip and trendy land of my birth. At night, I dreamed I smelled the beach. I actually tasted the salt of the ocean on my dream tongue. Throughout my decade of Nebraska exile, California grew in my imagination into a mythical Ithaca. But unlike the hero Odysseus, I had no queen waiting for me on the golden shores of my lost kingdom. For that elusive treasure, I would need to grow up and find a Nebraska woman. Perhaps it is because Nebraska breeds a very special woman. The kind of woman who stoically endures some of the most brutal winters on earth for months on end, when bitter Arctic winds blast down from Canada and sweep through the Dakotas, foiled by nothing taller than prairie grass. The kind of woman who, when the mercury tops a humid 110 degrees, will wash her hair in the kitchen sink and blithely brush it dry on the back porch. The kind of woman who without blinking an eye will lance a boil, staunch a bleeding wound, or gut a fish. The kind of woman who will, with firm and loving hands, tenderly end the life of a suffering dog or cat. Despite all the cruelties and hardships of this land inflicts upon them, these remarkable women love Nebraska. If destiny conspires to pluck them up and carry them off to faraway places, their hearts remain rooted in the black, thick loam of the prairie. They pine for that terrible and beautiful place like lovesick maidens who never recover from an adolescent romance. The change of seasons pulls their hearts back to the awesome land that wooed them so roughly. Like the majestic sandhill cranes, their souls migrate year after year back to the cruel and fragrant Eden of the Platte River Valley, a world the Pawnees called the Happy Hunting Grounds. DuQuette men must be a lot like Nebraska, for it takes a Nebraska woman to love us, to endure us, and to inexplicably draw strength from our brash insensitivity and other unmanly DuQuette virtues a lesser woman might mistake for self-absorbed stupidity. In 1966, my Nebraska odyssey ended. I returned to California immediately after high school graduation and began classes at Orange Coast College in Costa Mesa, California. College life in Southern California in 1966 and 67 was a very rich and colorful experience, little of which had anything to do with academics. The popularity of mind-expanding drugs and social and political upheavals of the day, triggered by the civil rights movement and the war in Vietnam, were far more interesting to me than my English and drama classes. I was profoundly affected by my experiences with LSD, and soon began to seriously turn my attention to the study and practice of Eastern mysticism, especially Hindu philosophy and yoga. My brother Mark was my mystical fellow traveler on most of these psychedelic journeys. He'd often volunteered to be my sane and sober babysitter and guide while I tripped. On alternate occasions, I would do the same for him. The experiences were spiritual journeys we took very seriously, and the deeper we plunged into the depths of our own psyches, the more we knew that self-realization was the most important thing a human being can achieve during his or her time on Earth. One afternoon, the day before the full moon, we decided to drive out to the desert and take a massive dose of LSD together. We watched the full moon set in the west and the sun rise in the east. We vowed we would not return from the desert until we were holy men. I wrote about this event at greater length in an earlier autobiography. So I won't bore you with the details here. I will instead jump to the quiet moments a few hours after that eternal day in the desert. We managed to drive safely back to Costa Mesa late in the afternoon. We were still quite high, but confident enough in our ability to maintain in public to visit our local tavern. It was there, sitting on the most comfortable bar stool in the universe, my acid-soaked brain still soaring through the rarefied clouds of technicolor consciousness, that I realized that I would be incapable of safely controlling the awesome and terrible nuclear fusion of consciousness that was taking place in my cranium. I started to see the big picture. If I were to continue my incarnational adventure, I would need something, someone, to ground me, to anchor me, to hold my feet to the ground before I exploded spectacularly but prematurely on the launch pad of life. I needed a Nebraska woman. I had dated Constance on and off during our junior and senior years of high school in Nebraska. And when I returned to California, we kept in touch by old-fashioned letters. We were friends. She liked my progressive politics, and I liked her hair. We certainly never discussed marriage. But now I could not imagine a future without her. More accurately, I saw quite clearly there wasn't a future without her. Perched high upon the oracular tripod of my psychedelic bar stool, I saw the future set in stone, as fixed and immutable as the past. I called her from the payphone near the pinball machine and proposed marriage. To this day, I can't tell you why I asked, and to this day, she doesn't know why she said yes. But like a traditional Hindu couple whose parents sealed the marriage contract when they were babies, we dutifully surrendered to our destinies, then and there. We've been married, and at the time I wrote this, 47 years, but we've been married 55 years this coming November. Neither one of us can tell you exactly why. Do we love each other? Yes, of course we love each other. Are we happy? Well, sometimes yes and sometimes no. But at least we've grown wise enough to realize that ultimately one person can never make another person happy, and even if we could, love is bigger than happiness. Each individual in the world, whether married or single, is responsible for his or her own condition of happiness or unhappiness. Now, what does all this have to do with homemade magic? My answer is simple. The edifice of my life, my home, my work, my magic, is built upon a foundation that is the love, the support, the opposition, the criticism, the irritation, the wisdom, and the ruthless condemnation of this Nebraska maid. Constance is a supernatural force of nature, an awesome and terrible magical being, a goddess, a devil, an angel, a harpy, a demon. She's also the archetypal wife, mother, and grandmother. But greater than all these things, she is her own unique universe. She is, in every relevant sense of the term, a living saint. Take it from me, it's not easy to live as a mortal husband. It's not easy for a mortal husband to live with a saint. Any envy you might feel for me and my extraordinarily good matrimonial fortune must be tempered by an outpouring of pity. For even though I am blessed with many unique and admirable qualities, I am not a saint. It's important that you remain mindful of this cruel irony as I attempt to recite a few of our family adventures in the pages of this book. Constance and I took no vows to each other during our homemade wedding ceremony of so long ago. We promised each other nothing. Nonetheless, for over 55 years, for better or worse, in sickness and in health, this Nebraska maid has been and remains the home in my homemade Magick. And that's my little ode on International Women's Day. I hope it came through okay. Here I am again in the parking lot of a grocery store while my Nebraska maid is buying our nourishment. Anyway, hope to see you tomorrow. Continue to be good to yourself and be good to each other. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will.